Today's Gemara is very, very lofty, very high, and we have to avoid the risk of the temptation to believe that we understand.
That's where faith comes in, right?
Absolutely. There's such a desire to make sense of the things that we encounter in the world, or the things that we learn. And the way we do that, the usual way of processing information, is by integrating it into the things that we already know. And we basically make links. Oh, I know about this concept, I know about that concept, and we try to basically fit it into our pre-existing understanding. And that's why, generally speaking, the rabbis were very, very against teaching the esoteric parts of the Torah to everybody, because they're concerned that people will come to make gross mistakes about Hashem. But nevertheless, since the time of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchok Luria, and then after him the Baal Shem Tov, they shared with us that in these days, just before the coming of Mashiach, is actually a mitzvah to learn the secret parts of the Torah. But yet at the same time, even though there has been a major, watershed moment 500 years ago and on to move forward to learn the secrets of the Kabbalah and Chassidut, etc. Nevertheless, great caution must be taken when studying these things. And the most important thing is not to ascribe any literal interpretation of these things, because then, yes, we can end up far, far, far away from the tenets of our faith, which believe that Hashem has no form, and that all the descriptions that we speak of are only anthropomorphisms, things that are allegory, things that are not literal in any sense. And Daf Yud Gimel of Chagiga is a page full of this stuff. So I don't pretend to really understand it, but nevertheless, I will try to give at least the pshat of the Gemara, that which the Gemara itself is trying to teach us. Remember that the whole idea of writing down of the Gemara is to preserve the oral tradition for future generations. And so, therefore, without any choice, they wrote this down in the Gemara for everybody to learn, because there's no other way to do it.
But Rabbi, the Gemara teaches us a certain way of learning by association between sentences and so forth. But you're telling us not to do it, not to assume that that something correct. Is.
Yesterday, I quoted from Rabbeinu Hananel, who explained that all these things that have been transcribed over here were not really drashot, as you described, that the way that we're supposed to learn things out, but rather they're Kabbalah, Halacha, LeMoshe Misinai. These were received as traditions from Moshe Misinai, and the verses that we're using are not verses that are the typical way of drush, but rather they are asmach, asmachta, and asmachta often is just there to help you remember these points, not to teach you about these points, if you understand what I mean. Okay.
All right.
Rabbi, translate asmachta and drush again.
Right. So asmachta is a support, like smach. Like smicha means you put your hands on something, right? And you put all your weight on it. To be somech on somebody means to rely on somebody. And they
depend on it. Yeah.
And so they stand there as a support. So these verses stand there as a support to help us remember the things that we received as a tradition from Moshe, not that we use these verses as we do with some other verses where we actually use them to derive ideas, to learn out different ideas. That's a whole different way of learning. Okay, we are holding on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, and we're holding by Tanya Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So this is towards the top of the page. 2, 4, 6, 8, about nine lines down. Okay, 9 lines down. That's what we're holding. I just want to make sure everybody's in. Okay.
Rabbi who? Which Rabbi?
Amar Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. So let's just put things in their place. We've spoken about Maaseh Bereshis, and in Maaseh, with regards to Maaseh Bereshis, which means the creation of the heaven and the earth, we spoke about what's above, what's below the earth, the pillars. We spoke about what's above. We spoke about the different heavens, the 7 heavens that we spoke about, and we even said that there's an 8th one, but we can't really delve into that any further. And now that we've discussed Maaseh Bereshis, there's something else which is very esoteric, and one should not learn this. Well, the Gemara itself will put limitations on who can be taught this and how much of it can be taught, and that is the Maaseh HaMerkava. The Maaseh HaMerkava is the chapter in Yecheskel, chapter 1 of Yecheskel, and so just remember now that what I did was I pulled it up on Safaria, because what I would like to do is I'd like to go through the first chapter of Yecheskel. I do not intend to pretend that I understand what this all means, but I think because we're going to be quoting a lot of psukim from Yecheskel and talking about different places in the chapter, it might be worthwhile just to go through it without delving deeply at all, just to read through it and get a bit of a level of comfort to know which psukim come where and so on. So I'll just read it in the English, so it'll go faster. In the 30th year on the 5th day of the 4th month, when I was in the community of the exiles by the Cheber Canal, the heavens opened up and I saw a vision of God. That's why it's called the vision of Yecheskel. What happened on the 5th day of the month? It was the 5th year of the exile of King Yoachim, and the word of Hashem came to the priest of Ziki Yecheskel ben Buzi by the river canal, Al Nahar Kvar, right, in the land of the Chaldeans, and the hand of the Hashem came upon him there. Now, verse number 4. Here he starts describing what he saw, and this becomes, what we're going to be speaking about pretty much the whole daf. It talks about this. It says like this: and I looked, and behold, ruach sa'ara ba min hatzofim, a stormy wind came sweeping out of the north. Now, the north refers to Bavel over here, because we know that the king of Bavel came down from the north and he conquered, and the northeast, but the north he conquered Eretz Yisrael. And so Yecheskel is describing what he saw. He saw a stormy wind, right, coming from the north. Onan Godol, ve'esh mislakachas, a huge cloud and a flashing fire, noiga loy soviv, and there's a radiance surrounding it, or mitoicha, and in the center of it, ein hachashmal mitoicha eish, it's like a gleam as of an amber. Okay, so this chashmal is like a flash that's coming out of the fire. Pasuk Hey. And in the center was also the figures of 4 creatures, and these are their appearance. So he says there's Demus Adam Lahena, the figures of human beings, and then you have Arba Panim Le'echos, each one had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. Then it goes on to say Regel Yishara, the legs each were fused onto a single rigid leg. V'chaf ragleihem, and the feet of each, kekaf regel egel, were like a single calf's hoof. V'neitzitzim, and their sparkle, ke'en choshes kolol, like a luster of burnished bronze. Pasuk Ches, it's just one parak, okay? V'idei Adam, they had the hands of human beings, mitachas knafeim, under their wings, al arbas reviehem, the 4 of them, below them, the 4 of them had their faces and their wings on their 4 sides. Each one's wings touched the ones of the other. They did not turn when they moved. Each moved in the direction of any of its faces. If you don't understand what's going on, it's perfect. It means you're following. Okay. Odemus Penehem Penei Adam. Each one of them had a human face at the front. Penei Arya El Hayumin. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right. Larbatam. Each Larbatam. For all four of them, and each of the four had a face of the ox, right? So it mentions here the ox, and then the face, each four of them had the face of an eagle. So you've got the face of a man, face of a lion, face of a ox, and a face of an eagle. Okay, verse 11. Their faces and their wings, perudois milamila. They were separated above. Leish shtayim chovres ish ushtayim mechasis es gviasehen. So each had two touching those of the others, while the other two covered its body. Okay. Veish el aver ponav, and each could move in the direction of any of its faces. Yelechu will be able to move. El asher yeshama haruach laleches yelechu lo yisabu belechtam. They went wherever the spirit impelled them to go without turning when they moved. Let's keep going. Pasuk Yud Gimel. Udemus hachayos mareim kegach, when he's describing the appearance of the chayos, these creatures, right? Their face were like burning coals. Boyaros kemare alapidim. They were the fire were suggestive of torches. He misalechas ben achayis, and they kept moving about among the creatures. And the fire had radiance. And out of the fire there was this lightning that came out, right? This flash that kept coming out. Then in Pasuk Yudalid it says, "V'chayis rotzu v'shov kemari abasok," that these chayis, they were dashing to and fro like flares. Like the appearance of flares that come out. Tesvav 15. And I gazed at the creatures. And behold, oifan echad ba'aretz. I saw one wheel on the ground. Next to each of the four-faced creatures. Pasuk Tes Zion. Mare haifanim umasehem. As for the appearance and the structure of the wheels, they gleamed like beryl. All four had the same form. All had the same form. The appearance and the structure of each was as two wheels cutting through each other. Pasuk Zion, al arba revi'ein belechtam. And when they moved, each could move in the direction of any of its four quarters.
Rabbi.
Yes.
But isn't Ophanim another type of angel?
It's true.
Why are they translating it as a wheel?
The reason, that's a good question. The reason why they're translating it as a wheel is because you have a wheel that when it's at the top, right, its top is close to heaven, and its bottom is touching the earth. And we're describing the type of angels that, on the one hand, their feet are firmly down on the ground, and their head reaches above the heavens. And that's why it uses the analogy of a wheel. Not that I understand what that means, but that's the explanation. Let's hopefully. Yeah.
Rabbi, can I ask you, how did you translate Tarshish?
Tarshish?
Yeah.
Here they use the word beryl, B-E-R-Y-L. I have no idea what that is. No idea.
A barrel?
Not a barrel as in a barrel. It's B-E-R-Y-L. I don't even know what that word is.
Oh, B-E-R-Y-L.
Y-L. I don't know what that is. So if somebody wants to help, with pleasure. Okay. let's just try to go through the rest of the chapter. It's just to be able to kind of, when he's referring back to these psukim, backwards and forwards, we'll be able to kind of remember.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the translation is a precious stone.
A precious stone. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so al-arbas revi'ein belechtom, this is pasuk Zayin, yelechu le'isabu belechton. And when they moved, each could move in the direction of any of its four quarters. They did not veer when they moved. Pasuk Yudches v'gaben v'goiva lahem v'yira lahem. The rims were tall and frightening. For the rims of all four were covered all over with eyes. Okay. Now, over and when the creatures moved, when the creatures moved forwards, the wheels moved at their sides. And when the creatures were born above the earth, the wheels were born too. I think that means that they were lifted up. Pasuk 20. Whenever the Spirit impelled them to go, they went wherever the Spirit impelled them to go. And the wheels were born alongside them, for the spirit of the creatures was in the wheels. Pasuk Chav Aleph. It's a long parak. When those moved, these moved. And when those stood still, then these stood still. And when those were born above the earth, the wheels were born alongside them. For the spirit of the creatures was in the wheels. Or the mus. Above the heads of the creatures was a form, an expanse with an awe-inspiring gleam as of crystal. Not to al Roshem el Maila, which was spread out above their heads. Pasuk Chav Gimel v'tachas harakia, and under the expanse, kanfei mishoris isha lachosa, each one had pairs of wings extended towards those of the others. Again, this is Yecheskel describing what he sees. Okay, leish shtayim mechasis lehena, ish shtayim mechasis lehena es k'v'yosem, and each had another pair covering its body. Well, Ashma, and I heard the sound of their wings, kikul mayim rabim, like the sounds of mighty waters, kikul shakai belechtam, like the sound of Hashem, belechtam kul hamulok kul ma'aneh, a tumult like the din of an army. And when they stood still, they would let their wings droop. Pasuk 25, from above the expanse over their heads came a sound. And when they stood still, they would again let their wings droop. And above the expanse, which was on top of their heads, it was like the semblance of a sapphire. That was the way the Demusa Kisei, that was the way the throne appeared. It was like a sapphire stone. Al Demusa Kisei, and on top of this semblance of a throne, Demus Kamari Adam Olav Milmaila, there was a semblance of a human form. And I saw Ke'ein Chashmal, what a base law, Sovim, Mimare Mostav Olamala, from what appeared as his loins up, I saw a gleam as of amber. Right, that's the chashmal. What looked like a fire encased in a frame. And from what appeared as his loins down, I saw what looked like fire. There was a radiance all about him. I think phew. I thought this would never end. Okay, last passage. Like the appearance of a bow, that will shine in the cloud like a rainbow. Which will be in the clouds on the day of rain. So too was the appearance of the radiance, Saviv, that was surrounding. That was the appearance of the semblance of the presence of Hashem. And when I beheld it, I fell on my face, and I heard the voice of someone speaking. So there you have the first chapter of Yecheskel, and this is what the whole tumult is about when we're going to learn the Gemara today. Okay, so let's do it. Let's get into it. Again, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, Tanya, Sworn in the Brisa, Rabbi Yechon ben Zakkai. Everybody have it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tanya, taught in the Brisa, Rabbi Yechon ben says, Matshuva, Heshivatu Baskel Rasha. What did this Baskel, this heavenly voice, say to that wicked man? This is referring to Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, it's talking about Nebuchadnezzar. The Shosha Omar, at the time when Nebuchadnezzar said, E'ele al Bamosei, of I will ascend over the tops of the cloud, Adam Elin, and I will liken myself to the Most High, meaning Hashem. This is something that the Baskel says not when he's destroying the Beis Hamikdash, which was a terrible thing, but rather when he spoke with arrogance and tried to say that I will ascend to these clouds and I will liken myself to Hashem. Yatsa Baskel, a voice came out, and said to him, Rasha ben Rasha, a wicked man, the son of a wicked man. Ben Benoy shel Nimrod HaRasha, the grandson of Nimrod HaRasha. Now, although he wasn't the actual physical grandson of Nimrod HaRasha, all the Mefarshim explain that it means that he followed in the ways of Nimrod HaRasha, as he says that Shehimrid Kol Ha'olam Kuloi Allah v'Malchusai, he caused the entire world to rebel against himself during his reign. What did, in other words, why was Nimrod punished? Why was Nebuchadnezzar punished? Because Nebuchadnezzar behaved in a manner that was similar to Nimrod. In what way? Just like Abraham was thrown into the fire by Nimrod, Nebuchadnezzar threw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into the fire. And so too, the Nimrod tried to encourage people to build the Tower of Babel and fight against Hashem. And so too, here you had Nebuchadnezzar also trying to rebel against Hashem, and his end was a bad one. And so the Baskel is screaming out to him, what a fool you are. You're a Rasha, you're Ben Rasha. Let's look. You're thinking you want to come and try and compare yourself to Hashem. How many years is it already of a man? How much does the person live? Shivim Shana. It's 70 years. Shenema, like it says, that the days of our years are of 70 years. The imbig words, and if with might, is Shmainim Shana, 80 years. So that is the general length of the entire span of the life of a person. Now, when we speak about not Hashem, just we're talking about the creation right now. The distance between here and the Rakia is 500 years, a 500-year journey. And Kabbalah explains that these are everything that we're going to be reading over here, right? Not really physical space, right? Because of course Hashem is unlimited, but we're talking about levels. But nevertheless, it uses terminology which makes it sound like a span of time because you need to cover geographical space. So because the Gemara continues and says, and when you want to know the thickness of the Rakia itself, it's Mahalach Chamish Me'eshana. That's already another 500 years. And between each and every Rakia, we said there are 7 Rakias. So you've got what? Another 7 times 500 years, right? Anybody keeping track? At the end, it'll be 15 times 500 years, right? And then above these heavens, you have the Chayes HaKodesh. And we're saying there's another 500 years. And then but now you have the feet of the Chayes are equivalent to everything we just mentioned, okay? So it's double. You've got double everything we just mentioned, right? And then you have the Karsuli HaChayes, which is the next part of the Chayes, above the feet. Is Kineged Kulam, this is the ankles of the Chayes, which are equivalent to all of them. And then you have Shreiki HaChayes, Kineged Kulam. Then the lower parts of the legs of the Chayes are equivalent to all of that. Again, we're doubling and doubling. And then Ruchuvei HaChayes, Kineged Kulam. The middle parts of the legs of the Chayes are equivalent to all of them. And then Yarchei the upper parts of the legs of the Chayes are equivalent to all of them. So, and you never had Netzah, Anyway, but let's keep going. We don't stop there. Then the torsos of the Chayes is equivalent to all of them. Then the necks of the Chayes are equivalent to all of them. In other words, everything we've just mentioned until now, it's equivalent to all of them. The space it takes up and the amount of time it would take to cross that space. Rosh HaChayis Keneged Kulam, the heads of the Chayis, is equivalent to all of what we mentioned prior to that. And Karni HaChayis Keneged Kulam, then the horns of the Chayis are equivalent to all of that. And then Lamaila Mehen Kisei HaKavod, and above of that is the throne of Hashem. And what does the throne of Hashem consist of? Well, let's start with the feet. Ragli Kisei HaKavod Keneged Kulam. The feet of the throne of Hashem is connected all the things we mentioned up until now. And then the Kisei HaKavod itself, Kisei HaKavod Keneged Kulam, is equivalent to all of them. And Melech, Kel, Chai V'Kayam, Rav V'Nisa, Sheikhan Aleim, the king, the living and enduring God, exalted and uplifted, rests his Shechina upon all of them. Va'ata, meaning you, Nebuchadnezzar, Amarti, you said, El Abamosai, I will ascend over the tops of the cloud. Abamosai, of the tops of the cloud. Adam Elyon, I will compare myself to the Most High. No. Achel Sha'el Torah, it's to the pit. You'll be to the grave. You'll be thrown down. You'll be lowered al yak sebor, to the bottom of the pit. That's where your end will be. Not only will you not ascend the clouds or be anything compared to Hashem, but you're not even going to get a proper kavura. You're going to be thrown to the bottom of the pit. So that is something that is connected to what we've been discussing, because we're talking about these rakim, and once we talk about the rakim and the chayas, we say that we describe them as each one being a very, very great distance. Okay, obviously, Kabbalah explains that all of these things are just allegorical. They're not physical. They're not literal. They speak about different levels. All right, now, the Gemara now quotes from the Mishnah. What did we say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah at the beginning of the parak said, when we're talking about who you can teach what and how many people what's the limit of people you're allowed to learn particular subjects with? He says when it comes to the Merkava, that that one cannot expound upon a Ma'aser Merkava in a class of even one student, unless we say it gives the certain qualifications and criteria in order for that student to be worthy and ready to be able to receive that. So now, this is the Gemara. Although the Mishnah said that you cannot teach it to somebody who doesn't have these qualities, nevertheless, there's a certain qualification that Reb Chia is going to say about this. Reb Chia taught in the Brisa, Avol Moisrin Loi Rashi Prakim. You can't go in and teach him the whole Ma'aser Merkava and the depth and the details of it. However, what you can do is you can give him over the chapter headings of these ideas of the Ma'aser Merkava. Says the Gemara, Reb Zera says, "Ein Moisin Rashi Prakim ela la'av bezdin." Even the Rashi Prakim that you just mentioned, no, even that can only be given over to somebody who's the head of the bezdin, the head of the bezdin, the head of a rabbinical court, which means he has to be somebody who is very well versed, right? Very well learned. And not just, or it seems to be saying that it's either or and to anyone whose heart worries within him, which means he has real yirah shamayim and real fear of heaven and real humility, and so therefore he won't have this arrogance of thinking that he understands. You know, one of the challenges of knowledge is, they say, a little knowledge is dangerous, right? Or there's a Yiddish expression that says, "Anar ba'vaisman nishkin halbazach." You don't show a fool half finished product, because he walks away and thinks he's seen everything, right? So too, when a person encounters a new piece of information, it's very dangerous, because now that he's had his mind blown by this new piece of information, he thinks, or he could think, I understand everything. And obviously, no human being understands everything. There's always so much that we don't understand. So therefore, the person needs to have this characteristic of having tremendous fear of heaven and humility, so that he wouldn't come away and talk himself into thinking that he understands things literally. Iked Amri. Others say that in fact Reb Zera didn't say it's one or the other, but rather it's both. He has to be an Av Bezdin, and what kind of Av Bezdin? The who, and this is only, it's got to be a kind of Av Bezdin, whose heart warriors within him. In other words, he has this tremendous Yir Shemayim, and he has this humility. Unfortunately, that isn't always the case. There are some people who are great scholars and lack that humility. But Baruch Hashem, there's an expression, Loi Alman Yisrael, the Jewish people are not widowers. Baruch Hashem, there are great Gedolim who really have all of these characteristics. Both they are very well educated, well learned, and they also possess the tremendous characteristic of being very humble. Anyway, says the Gemara. Amar Reb Ami. Reb Ami says like this: you do not transmit the secrets of the Torah, and you can only transmit it to somebody who has these 5 characteristics, these 5 traits. Now, the Gemara is not going to explain what these are now. The Gemara will explain these later on in the Gemara on Daf Yudal, in the next Daf Dalet. So I'm just going to read them and we'll come to them later on. It says, Sar Chamishim Unsu Ponim, captain of 50 and a respected person. Now, the Yoyetz, an advisor, v'chacham, and a teacher of the wise, chacham charoshim, a teacher of the wise. But why does he call it charoshim? We'll see later on. It means that he causes everybody else to be quiet. When he's learning, he commands such respect that no one talks while he's teaching. Or novain, and he's somebody, or novain lachash, and somebody who comprehends mysteries or whispers. So the Gemara is going to deal with these things later on. So let's just keep moving. And Reb Ami says, now this is very controversial because the question is, especially today, are you allowed to teach Torah to a non-Jew? It's not so simple, right? So here, Reb Ami is saying as a blanket rule that one cannot transmit the words of Torah to an idolater. Shenema, like it says in the pasuk, right? That Hashem, it says Magid Devar of Yaakov. We say this every day that Hashem has related His words to Yaakov, Chukov and Mishpat of Yisrael, statutes and His laws to Israel. He has not done so for any other nations, and such laws they don't know. And so, therefore, this is an admonishment and a warning that one should not go and teach the Torah to Oivdei Kichavim. There's much discussion. There's much discussion around this, and some people say that first of all, the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. It's not only possible, but it's actually a mitzvah to teach them. And the question is whether other things, if they're going to come and learn them on their own, would you be allowed to teach it to them if they didn't need you anyway? Because really, there is no biblical command apart from this verse that we're using, which doesn't sound like a command. It sounds like just God hasn't taught them the Torah. It doesn't mean that they cannot be taught them, but there is there's no biblical command not to teach them Torah. However, in the Gemara, elsewhere, it says that a guy that learns Torah or a guy that keeps Shabbos is Chayav Misa. So the question is, are we transgressing the violation of Lifnei Iver Lesit and Michal? You should not place a stumbling block before somebody else. And if they're prohibited from learning the Torah and from keeping Shabbos, so then if you were to help them or encourage them to do that, would you be over on Lifnei Iver? These are interesting discussions, but the Gemara doesn't get into it. The Gemara just leaves it at that. Okay.
Right.
Yes.
So how do you handle the situation with the rabbis who translated the Torah?
So
based upon this statement here. So
the Gemara in Megillah deals with it, and the Gemara in Megillah says that indeed it was a tragic day, where Ptolemy, the king over there, forced them to translate the Torah, and they didn't have a choice. But nevertheless, at the same time, there were tremendous miracles that took place where that they translated it exactly the same. Although they took the 70 rabbis, that's where you get the term Septuagint. There were the Targum Shivim. You had the 70 rabbis that were put into different rooms, and they came out with the same product at the end. And so Hashem obviously helped them to do that, which means to say that there was a point in time where Hashem forced, so to speak, the situation that there was no choice other than to translate it. And nevertheless, it actually became a terrible day. If I'm not mistaken, that's one of the things that happened on was it Tes Teves, which Tes Teves used to be a fast day because of this. So you're right. There was a prohibition, as there was really a prohibition not to write down the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And nevertheless, there came a point in time where the rabbis, there's a verse in Kapitel Kuf Yutes, chapter 119 of Tehillim, which says, "Eis lasses la Hashem heferu terasecha," that sometimes there's a moment where you have to act on behalf of Hashem, and as a result, sometimes heferu terasecha, which means they
Nullified.
Hefer means they destroyed, or they
Nullified.
annulled the Torah. In other words, the call of the hour was that's what had to be done to be able to save the Jewish people, or to preserve the Torah. But Enochanami, you're right. You're right. It isn't the ideal that Hashem wanted, but ultimately Hashem allowed for it to happen.
Thank you.
Okay. So
I
now,
wanted to ask,
yeah.
when Rabbi Hillel taught the man that walked into him and asked him to teach him the Torah on one foot, was
Yeah.
he a goy or a ger?
That's an excellent question, and the Mefarshim deal with that, and they say that he was a ger, and Hillel sensed that the purpose of teaching him was going to be for him to become a ger, and therefore it was permitted. It was permitted.
He was a rabbi later. I thought he was one of the rabbis mentioned
Right.
in the Gemara.
Right, that's correct. But it seems, and as you'll see in a minute, there's a story that we're going to discuss about where Rabbi Yosef. We'll get to that. But the point is that the point is that it seems that with Hillel, he first examined the goy, the ger, to ensure that he was actually going to learn for the purpose of becoming a Jew, in which case that sets a precedent for being able to teach someone who's not Jewish for the purpose of conversion. Otherwise, you're right. They have no right to learn to learn the Torah.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
No problem. So the Gemara says like this. Here's a story. Amalei Rabbi Yechanan Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Yechanan said to Rabbi Elazar, "Ta agmarach b'maisem merkava. Come, and I'm going to teach you the maisem merkava." So obviously Rabbi Yechanan thought that Rabbi Elazar was worthy to learn it. Amalei, so Rabbi Elazar said to Rabbi Yechanan, "Like kashoy, I'm not old enough." In other words, perhaps I might have the other characteristics, but one of the characteristics is you have to be 50 years old, right? That's the idea. It's when we said over here that one of the 5 things is that you're a yoyetz, and a yoyetz, it says ben chamishim la'etza, right? In Pirkei Avos it says you're 50 years old to give counsel, to give. So therefore, I'm not 50 years old, and so therefore I'm not old enough. Kikash, when Rabbi Elazar was old enough, in other words, when he turned 50, Nach nafshay the Rabbi Yechanan had already passed away, so he missed the opportunity. And there was a wise man who once said, "You've got to seize the opportunity of a lifetime during the lifetime of the opportunity." Right? So if once that lifetime of that opportunity goes, you missed it. But it wasn't the end, because Amalei Reb Asi, another great Tana, Amira, Reb Asi said to him, "Ta v'agmarach b'maisem merkava. Come and I'll teach you maisem merkava." Amalei, so Rabbi Elazar said to him, "Izakai, if I would have merited, then, meaning if I was worthy to learn these Maisa HaMarkava, then Gemir Samir Rabbi Yechanan, I would have learned it from Rabbi Yechanan." And so because Rabbi Yechanan passed away before I could learn it, he took that as a sign, it's not for me. And there were many such Gedolim who they believed that certain things were not for them, and they shied away from it. That's not to say they didn't learn Gemara. That's not to say that they didn't learn some of these things, but they didn't focus on it, and they didn't delve deeply into it because they decided it's not for them. Now, here's another story where not the student was reluctant to learn from his teacher, but the teacher was reluctant to teach altogether. What happened was like this: Rav Yosef having Gomer Ma'aser recover. Rav Yosef, who was one of the greatest teachers of the Gemara. So Rav Yosef, he was proficient in the Ma'aser recover. Now, Sove the Pumpadisa, the elders of Pumpadisa, who we say was Rashi says who I think Rashi. Anyway, I wrote it down over here. Rav Yehuda and Rav Eina. Rav Yehuda and Rav Eina, they have a tonu b'ma'aser bereshis. They were learning the ma'aser bereshis. So Amrulay, these elders of Pumdisa, said to Rabbi Yosef, "Listen, we know ma'aser bereshis. We're coming to you for the next level. We want to know. We want to know the ma'aser merkava. Ligma lama ma'aser merkava. Teach us ma'aser merkava." Amalahu, he said to them. Rabbi Yosef said back to them, "You know what? You want me to teach you ma'aser merkava? Agmanli ma'aser bereshis. So you first, please teach me ma'aser bereshis and bossa. All right. So then I'll teach, and then I'll teach you. Right. That's what it sounded like he was saying. That you teach me ma'aser bereshis first, and I'll teach you ma'aser merkava. So bossa the agman. Once they finished teaching him ma'aser bereshis, the question here is, Did Rabbi Yosef really not know Ma'aser Bereshis, or was he testing them to see whether their knowledge was sufficient to be able to teach them Ma'aser Merkava? So once they finished teaching him, Amrulay, they said to him, "No, ligmrun mar b'Ma'aser Merkava." Now, let the master teach us Ma'aser Merkava. Amalahu, Rabbi Yosef said to them, "Tanina bahu." We've learned a brisa about these matters. It says in the pasuk, "Dvash v'cholov tachas l'shoneich." Honey and milk are under your tongue. And what is the brisa say on that verse? It says, "Dvar mamasukim midvash," things that are sweet as honey. Yutach l'shonecha should remain under your tongue. What are these things that are sweet as honey? This refers to like the Ma'aser Merkava. He says, therefore, I'm not going to teach it to you. Right? These things that are sweet as honey, I can't teach to you. What about the fact that you said that we should teach you Ma'aser Bereshis? I wanted to see whether you were proficient. And once I know that you're not proficient enough, you don't have all the characteristics that we spoke about before, therefore, I have an instruction not to share this with people who are not ready to receive it. So the Gemara stops and tells us another source for the Brice's teaching not to share it with other people, not from the pasuk that we just said, "Devash v'cholov tachas l'shonecha," that honey and milk are under your tongue, but rather we should learn the Brice. There's another source for the Brice. Rabbi says that we learn from this particular pasuk. It says in the book of Mishlei, Proverbs says, "Kvosim lilvushecha," let the lambs, that's kvosim, right, be your clothing. Now, don't read it kvosim, which are lambs, but kivushim, right? Dvarim shem kivshoyin shel olam, the things that are kivushim means the mysterious of the world. Yes, should be remain under your clothes, which means it should be remain concealed from others. Anyway, be that as it may, going back to the story, Amrulay, the elders of Pumbedisa, said to Rav Yosef, "Taninan behu ad v'yemeh elai b'nei adam." We've already learned the brises of the Ma'aser Merkava until we reach the verse. Then he said to me, "Son of man," that's right at the beginning of chapter 2. So we've already learned the whole chapter 1. In other words, you're saying that we're not proficient, right? But maybe we are proficient. V'haraya, we've already learned on our own from chapter 1 until chapter 2. Amalahu, so he said to them, if you've learned so far, then hein Ma'aser Merkava, right? These two verses at the end of the first passage of Yecheskel are the very essence of the Ma'aser Merkava. So what do you want from me? It's like there's two ways to understand this. Either you could say that you've already learned it, so you don't need me, or if you've already learned it and you didn't realize that you learned the Ma'aser Merkava, that itself is the best proof that you're not ready to learn it. In other words, you read it and you didn't even notice what you were reading. Anyway, however you understand it, Rav Yosef just said that the last 2 verses are the essence of the Ma'aser Merkava. Frank the Gemara, Meisvei, we learned in the Brisa, how could you, Rav Yosef, say that those 2 verses are the Ma'aser Merkava that's taught in the Brisa at Heichon Ma'aser Merkava? Until what point in the book of Yecheskel do we consider the Psukim to be part of the Ma'aser Merkava? Rabbi says, Ad ve'era basra, till the second time where it says the words Va'era, and that's verse 27, right? That is Ma'aser Merkava, and that's not all the way to the end of the chapter. Rabbi Yitzchok says Adar Chashmal until the third word of that verse, which says the Chashmal. But according to both Rebbe and Rabbi Yitzchok, right, most of the last two psukim are not part of Ma'aser Merkava, and Rabbi Yechon and Rabbi Yosef is saying seemingly that it is, because they say they got up to the chapter 2. So after the Gemara, he says Ad Va'era Mag Marinan, until the verse of I saw there you're allowed to teach. Mikan Va'elach. But from there and on, not that it's not part of Ma'aser Merkava, but it's the part of the Ma'aser Merkava is Masrin and Rashi Prakim. You're not allowed to teach the details. You only give the chapter headings. Iked Amri, others say that another version of it should be interpreted as follows: Ad Ve'era Masrin and Rashi Prakim, until the point of Va'era, which we said, according to Rebbe, it was Va'era. According to Rabbi Yitzchok, it was the word Chashmal in that pasuk, right? Until there, right? There, you're Masrin and Rashi Prakim. There, you're allowed to transmit the Rashi Prakim. Mekan Va'elach. But from there on, Imu Chochan, maybe Midaitoi in. If he's a student who will arrive to an understanding of these issues on his own, then yes, you're allowed to teach him the Rashi Prakim. If not, you're not allowed to. Why? Because if you remember, the last pasuk that we spoke over there doesn't talk about what's in the Ma'aser Merkava, but it talks about Hashem himself. And once you talk about Hashem himself, you cannot give any descriptions. And the fact that there are some things said about Hashem in that last verse, that's why we say you don't teach anything unless he's a maven midaitoi. In other words, a person as a chacham who will understand on his own. Then you can give over the Rashi Prakim and allow him to understand these things on his own. But otherwise, we don't even teach over the Rashi Prakim of that part, because they tell an interesting story about two Hasidim who both of them were very, very learned in Kabbalah. And they were sitting together at, in shul, and, they were, as the expression in the Megillah is, Ketev Levi Melech Bayoyim, they were after drinking some l'chaim, and one of them says to the other, tell me, what can you teach me about the essence of God? So the other guy just, shrugged it off. He didn't want to say anything. Obviously he'd learned a lot, but he decided it's better to be quiet. Anyway, this continued for a while. He kept on nudging him to say something, teach us something. And then finally the rabbi caved and he said something, I'll tell you, the essence of Hashem is, and he just said the word is, and the other rabbi gave him a friendly slap, as they say, right? Why? He says you can't begin to open your mouth and talk in a positive, descriptive manner about the essence of Hashem. Hashem is beyond all descriptions. You cannot even speak about it, even in any manner, right? We only know Hashem in the negative, meaning to say what he's not. We speak about all these high levels in Hashem, and we say Hashem is even higher than that. Okay, so the Gemara says, one second, you're telling me, according to Rabbi Yitzchok, that we could teach to somebody until the words Chashmal. So he says, Omid Arshinan b'Chashmal? Are we allowed to expound upon the word Chashmal? Wasn't there a story that there were disastrous consequences when that happened? As he says over here, V'ha hahu yenuka, the Darish b'Chashmal. There was this young man, right, who expounded on the word Chashmal, and you know what happened? V'nafka nura, there was a fire that came out, and Rashi says it came out from the Chashmal, right, v'achalte, and consumed him. So it was a terrible end. So one should not expound on Chashmal, seemingly from the story. And for the Gemara, Shiny Yinuki, it was different. A youth is different. Why? Because he has not yet reached his time. In other words, we've already said that there's a certain age limitation, but that doesn't mean just because somebody ignored that limitation, decided to go and expound on it, and was affected negatively as a result of it, right? Doesn't mean that that's going to happen to everybody, because if people make sure that they qualify all the things that we mentioned above, this doesn't have to happen. Now, obviously,
Rabbi, translate Chashmal again.
so, well, the Gemara is about to do that. The Gemara is about to translate Chashmal and basically break it up into two words. But Chashmal we usually speak of as a flash, right? A flash, whatever that means, right? It means a particular revelation of godliness that it's hard for us to even imagine. And the Gemara is going to right now actually go in and explain to us what that refers to. But I just want to say that this story that we just read about this youth doesn't necessarily mean that he died. It could be that he went crazy. It could mean that he went crazy. Like we know the story of the 4 people that went into the Pardes, went into the orchard, and they tried to dabble in the hidden secrets of the Torah, and one of them went crazy. So it could be that he tried to expound on the word chashmal and its true meaning and its true understanding, and that delving into and expounding upon that word caused him to be affected negatively, mentally or whatever it might be, as a result. It doesn't have to mean literally we imagine being struck by lightning from heaven. It doesn't have to mean literally. Okay, so the Gemara comes along, and because we have, it seems to me that the reason why we mentioned this next little piece over here is because we have somebody challenging the idea of teaching the word chashmal because of somebody who was negatively affected, and somebody coming along and responding and saying, no, we're not going to prevent everybody from expounding it just because one person did the wrong thing and did it before his time. So we have a similar thing where we're going to give credit to somebody else for saving the book of Yecheskel, because there's a whole discussion in the Gemara Baba Basra, right? It's very fascinating, Daf Yudalad and Daf Tesvav, where over there it has a whole discussion of how we get the books of the Tanakh. But the bottom line is, some books almost never made it in. Yecheskel was one of the books that almost never made it in. Omer Rabbi Yehuda says, Baram, Zochur Oisei Ha'ish L'Toiv. In truth, that man is to be remembered favorably. Who's that man? Chananya ben Chizkiya Shema. His name is Chananya ben Chizkiya, because in the Malihu, if not for him, Nigna Sefer Yecheskel, the Sefer Yecheskel would have been buried, would have been concealed. We would never have it as part of the Tanakh. Why? What happened? Shahayu Dvorav Seisin Torah. Because some of the words in the book of Yecheskel seem to contradict the Torah. If you look in Rashi, right, it says Sefer Yecheskel, Sheyesh B'Seifa, at the end of Yecheskel, it has Dvarim B'Karbonis, it has matters about the Karbonis, Sheseisim Divrei Torah, which seem to contradict the words of Torah. I'm not going to get into the details over here, but there's ways to understand it that it's not in contradiction, but because we might be talking about the inauguration of the Beis Hamikdash, there might be special kabbanas added. But the bottom line is, when you look at it on a surface level, it looks like the kabbanas that are suggested to being offered in the book of Yecheskel contradict what it says in the Torah about the daily sacrifices that are to be brought. And so therefore they were going to conceal it, because obviously if it has contradictions to the book of the Chamisha Chumsha Torah, the 5 books of Moses, then it shouldn't make it into the canon. So what did this guy Hanani ben Chizkiya do? He says, they brought up to him 300 barrels of oil. Rashi says this is to be able to light it, so he has light to learn. It's going to take him a while. And he sat in the upper chamber and expounded the verses of Yecheskel to be able to reconcile them with the Torah. And that way, he saved the book of Yecheskel. Now, really, they brought this down to bring the next story, right? What's the next story? The next story is the same Hananiah ben Chizkiya who saved the book of Yecheskel a second time. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught in the Brisa, Maisa betinik echot. There was a story with this one child. He was reading the verses in school or in the house of his teacher from the book of Yecheskel. And he was contemplating about chashmal, about the word chashmal and what it means. And a fire emerged from the chashmal and burned him. Again, it could be the same thing, that it negatively affected him. So as a result of this, everybody, because of this tragedy, they decided it's probably best that we hide the book of Yechezkel. Hanani ben Chizkiah said to them, 1 second, just because this guy was a prodigy, a very smart child, are all these children going to be prodigies that they would be able to understand from reading the word chashmal, what it means? No, not so. And so therefore, what we see from all these stories is that the problem with expounding on chashmal is really when somebody does it before the right time, before the right age, and they don't qualify on all these other things. But it seems that the tragedies that took place were a result of people being too young. But just because there were young people who made that mistake, it doesn't mean we should ban it from everybody. Now,
Rabbi.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Ma'aser Bereshis and Ma'aser Rekava. You can learn Ma'aser Bereshis before you're 50 years old and Ma'aser Rekava after you're 50. That's usually the standard.
Yes.
Okay. Is it because that the neshama begins to leave the body after 50 years of age? Is that people are more concerned about their, leaving this world and going beyond? I mean, I don't want to, delve into something that I'm not.
I think is like this. I'm not sure, but I'm going to tell you my guesstimate. What makes the most sense to me. I've thought about this and I've learned about this in general, and the general thing that sticks with me is as follows. Before a person can learn something, one has to have enough experience and knowledge to not get lost. What do I mean? If you don't have existing language that you've been taught by your teachers, what it means and what it doesn't mean, then you don't have the tools with which to integrate this new information. And so the expectation is that it takes 50 years to learn enough Torah, to learn enough of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, to be proficient enough not to go astray and not to misunderstand and misapply these secrets of the Torah. If you try to study this stuff before that, then because you don't have the language, you'll make up the language, or you'll have a childish language and therefore see it in too much of a literal sense, and then come away believing heretical thoughts about Hashem and about Ma'aser and about the Ma'aser Merkava. That's why I think it's the age of 50. And also, I mean, there's also a developmental thing about it. Like in the stages of development, when a person reaches 50, they view the whole world differently than how they viewed it at 40, and 40 is different to the way you viewed it at 30, and that's just part of a human's development of their mind, which is why we say that you might come to Bina at 40, but it doesn't mean you can give advice yet. Advice is you only give at 50.
So so it's a combination of Chachma, Bina, and Dat in order that allows you to move into that category. You're saying
correct. It's a matter of development, full development. Before you need to be fully developed before you can dabble in these issues.
There's a person on a level of humility equivalent to that of somebody who has Chachma Bina, who has the Chachma Bina Dat. Can a person who's on a very a level of humility also achieve that?
So I mean, the classic example is the Arizal. The Arizal died at the age of 36, and yet he was one of the greatest masters of the Kabbalah. So certainly there are special neshamot, there's special souls that come down here that are already fully developed. But for the most of us, we're not on that level, and we have years to go. And some people never get there, not because they are deficient in any ways for what they're needed for, but some things, they tell the story of the Beis Yosef, and I think also the Al-Sheikh, that they would come to the Arizal and they would try to listen to the teachings of the Arizal, and they were never successful in staying awake. And the Arizal told them, this is not part of your mission here on earth based on the source of your soul. And that's why you'll find, we say in davening, Sheyibane Beis Hamikdash b'mehera v'yameinu. Hashem should rebuild the Beis Hamikdash speedily in our days. V'seichel keinu b'seir secha, and that Hashem should give us our portion in the Torah, which means to say every person comes down with his neshama, and his soul has a specific area of the Torah that is most related to his soul, and that's why you'll find some people love Gemara, and they don't really find any interest in Medrash or they don't enjoy Kabbalah. Some people love Kabbalah and they don't like the Talmud, meaning they don't really connect. And some people say Medrash, that's my thing. I love Medrash, right? Everybody has what their soul connects to. A person has to be fully developed in all these areas to be able to then move to the areas of the Ma'aser Merkava.
Thank you.
Okay, so now the Gemara says, "My chashmal." What is chashmal? Somebody asked, "What's chashmal? What's the meaning of the word chashmal?" Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Now we're going over to Yud Gimel Amud Beis. What is chashmal? Chashmal is basically a composite of 3 words. Chayos means those are the angels, the chayos. Eish, which is the malalais, are speaking. So the chayos who are speaking fire, that's chashmal. Masnisa Tana, but the Gemara says that it was taught in a brisa. Another understanding of the word what chashmal means is itim choshais, itim malalais. When we're speaking about these chayos, there are times when they stand quietly. That's chashais, they're quiet. At times that they speak, right? Malalais, they speak, right? Like it says in the book of Kaheles, there are different times. Eis ledaber ve'eis lachshes. It's a time to speak and it's a time to be quiet. The same word, chash, right? To be quiet. So there are times that these angels are quiet and there are times that they speaks. When there is something coming out, the speech of Hashem emerges from Hashem. Choshes, who choshes? They are silent. While the no statements emerges from the mouth of Hashem, they speak. Now, obviously, Hashem doesn't have a mouth, and so on. These are all just allegories, just to be able to somehow communicate it. But obviously, Hashem is beyond any description. Now, we have another minute. It says in the pasuk, the chayes run to and fro like the appearance of the bazak, right? Like the flash. My rotzu v'shav. What does it mean that they run to and fro? Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, it's like the flame that comes out from an opening in a lime furnace. Basically, it shoots out and shoots back in, right? It shoots out and it shoots back in. If you look at the top Rashi, and we'll end with this, look at the top Rashi on top of Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. What does it mean, Rotz v'shuv? We're talking about these chayos. Moitzi and Roshon, they stick out their heads. Mitachas harakia, from underneath the rakia, hanotu l'mayla mirashem, to this heaven which is above their heads, so they stick their heads out into it, and they quickly withdraw them and bring them back in from the awe that of the Shechina b'mehirus, in great speed, karitza v'shiva, like running to and from shalav of a flame, hayotze b'piyapasik, that goes out of this kind of furnace, that it jumps out and jumps back in. So these chayas, when they stick their heads above the level that they're on to reach it above the rakia to see a vision of Hashem, they quickly withdraw back in as a result of the awe and the fear and the trepidation that they experience from what they've witnessed. And we'll stop here. I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. Parshas Zohar, according to most opinions, it's actually a biblical command that we should listen to the reading of the Torah this week, the special Parshas Zohar, and have in mind to truly remove the Amalek that's inside each and every one of us that causes us doubts and cools us off from our excitement in learning Torah and excitement in davening to Hashem and excitement bichlal surrounding Kedusha. And we should remember that he tries to do this when we're leaving our own personal Egypt, and we should remember what he's trying to do to help us to fight him and to get rid of him. Anyway, a wonderful Shabbos to you all.
Thank
you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye-bye, everyone.
Shabbos.
Shabbos. Bye-bye.